Meantime, the investigation intensifies. Authorities continue to hold the man arrested at LaGuardia Airport last night. He was carrying false ID, posing as a pilot. But others taken in for questioning at New York area airports yesterday have been cleared of any connection with the terrorist attack.
Meantime, authorities are relieved to report that some confusion led to the 3 New York area airports being closed last night, that it was nothing more than that. More than 10 individuals were detained but eventually released. Authorities were concerned that they may be involved in planning another attack since some had improper identification and included the 4 Arabic men who refused to get off a canceled flight on Tuesday that raised suspicions. Again, at this point, all of them have been released, and police believe that they do not appear to pose a threat.
Well, it seems Fox News' Rita Cosby confirmed what we've suspected in the past 24 hours about the arrests at JFK. As you may recall what Tim Minton first stated to Matt Lauer on NBC's Good Morning America September 13th, when the airports reopened, about the incident with Flight 23, that 3 Middle Eastern men refused to disembark, and they eventually met with a 4th man once the flight taxied back to the gate, and then all fled the airport. This is all likely why Rita Cosby is detailing an anomaly about there being 4 Arabic men in total who refused to get off a canceled flight. But just by basing this off common sense, assuming that these are the Flight 23 suspects on 9/11, the 3 leftover suspects from JFK, including the pilot, are not being held as terrorists momentarily themselves, since authorities are clearly covering up that there were additional hijacking attempts when the airports reopened at this point. But we need to continue to find out what these suspects are being detained for, particularly the associated terrorist link to the pilot.
Tom, senior U.S. officials are telling NBC News that U.S. intelligence is not ruling out further attacks by a long shot. That could help explain why there is so much of a big tense atmosphere around the airports around the country and also in the streets of New York City. The nation's airports and police have been warned by U.S. intelligence officials the next few days are critical. Terrorists may not have finished attacks on American targets, leaving airline employees and the investigators who back them up on edge. The New York airports remain closed until noon today because of 4 separate incidents, resulting in the questioning of a dozen passengers who were held but never officially arrested and finally released.
I heard stomping, everybody down, everybody heads down.
John Weinbach was in the middle of one of those incidents on a New York jet scheduled to take off for Los Angeles last night when police stormed the plane, handcuffing one passenger, wrestling another to the center aisle.
You can't fault them for, being on the ready. It was just frightening.
In other developments today, some of those who were detained last night at New York airport suspected of plotting a hijacking were released today. One man remains being held while police further investigate him. And in New York City today, police are detaining 2 more people that were called in as suspicious by a Manhattan hotel, both Saudi Arabians, both of whom had pilots' uniforms and certificates from a Florida flying school. They're still being investigated.
And confusion. It was confusion at New York City's airports that left them closed yesterday afternoon, according to authorities now. It appeared that there were a number of arrests. Turns out one may have been the case, a number of detainees, and a lot of misinformation surrounding that situation. Fox News anchor Todd Connor's live now at John F. Kennedy Airport, New York, with an update. Todd?
Hey, Shep, yeah, you're right. A little bit of confusion. However, Justice Department and law enforcement officials telling us that there were 4 incidents here at JFK and LaGuardia airports last night. There were 12 men and a female companion taken in for questioning. In one of these incidents, 2 men were actually taken off of a plane because they apparently showed up on an FBI list of people who they wanted to question. In all, of the 13 taken in, the FBI says only 1 is still being questioned.
At this point in the evening of September 14th, Fox News reaffirms what NBC already reported a couple hours earlier with the 4th witness account from JFK, that law enforcement officials confirmed that there were 12 suspects between 4 incidents at 2 New York airports, repeating that there is only the additional suspect being questioned. Aside for additional sparse evacuations or the 2 incidents with suspects at New York airport on a Saudi airliner, there will be brief additional anomalous incidents and details as we continue, as there will be some explanations to the degree of groups of suspects being detained, either under Immigration Naturalization Services or as material witnesses at other airports or areas with the FBI's mass pent bomb, twin bomb, dragnet investigation. But to stick with the main focus of New York airports, LaGuardia likely being the first case with the 2 suspects detained and being hauled away in the police car, Then 5 more arrested later in the afternoon with what seemed to be a cover story that they were going to an aeronautical or Boeing conference, rather than trying to pass themselves off as airport workers with items in their possession. Plus, the culmination of reports throughout the night also suggests the possibility that there could have been additional women involved in there too. But most importantly, given with the situation at JFK Airport, given the disposition without being able to decipher which ones could have been suspects for Flight 23 on 9/11, there was also 2 incidents between the situations of there being 5 suspects with 2 pilots, one of them being detained with a SWAT team aboard American Airlines Flight 133, and another possibility in the pilot lounge. However, most certain there is confirmed reports with the suspects disguised as airline workers, specifically in reference to Delta Airline uniforms. We will come back comparing these different incidents and others ahead, but let's see what's the outcome with at least the main suspect arrested, who's the pilot, and the other 2 detentions from JFK.
At New York's airports, open for the first time since Tuesday's terror attacks, travelers like Gene Bose were crossing their fingers.
What is your feeling about travel, about moving around when something as horrific as happened this past Tuesday occurred?
I'm a little nervous, and I think the scare last night that turned out to be a hoax at, was it LaGuardia or Kennedy? It frightened me even more.
Adding on to the story that's breaking while we're on the air this hour, the information that the FBI has what it calls a material witness and has issued an arrest warrant for that material witness. Our rock-solid reporter in Washington, Jim Stewart, reports that that material witness is believed to be in New York. Now, there's no name, no further information. For one thing, it's sealed, under court seal.
Right now, there is no evidence that any other terrorist actions are in play. However, authorities do believe there are terrorists at large who supported the hijackers. With us now is John Walsh, the host of America's Most Wanted on Fox.
Well, certainly the FBI is looking all over the country, as many law enforcement agencies are, the U.S. Marshals, etc. A lot of them are probably trying to get out of the United States right now. Some of them are probably still here figuring, you know what, we're going to wait for our next orders.
Now, for the past couple of days, Brian, FBI officials have been telling us they've made no arrests. Well, now that has changed. We're told the first arrest has been made in New York. We don't know who. The person was arrested on what's called a material witness warrant. What this tells us is that the officials, the FBI, does not have any evidence at this point to indicate that the person they've arrested was guilty or was a conspirator, was somehow involved in the bombing. But they want to hold this person. They believe this person has more information.
Pierre?
Yes, Peter, we've just been giving the following information by the Justice Department. A material witness warrant has been issued for a suspect in the investigation. We have not been told where this person is or if this person is in custody yet. We're being told that this information is under seal, which means it is secret. Let me explain what a material witness warrant is. That is a warrant that is issued when it's demonstrated that a person has information that is highly relevant to a criminal investigation and when there is a risk of flight, a high risk of flight, Peter. Again, this has just come out. A material witness warrant has been issued. We're checking now to see if this person is in custody, and if so, where.
And that, of course, is the key question. It is possible if this man is in custody at the moment, he is being held under immigration rules which allow the government to hold someone pretty indefinitely without any charge.
True, Peter, but this is a step beyond the immigration detention. And what I mean by that is this is a warrant specifically to hold this person because they have highly relevant information and are at high risk of flight. So this is specific to the investigation, but not a generic charge simply just to hold them.
Jim, what have you got?
Dan, it's true. We apparently have our first official arrest in this case, but it's not clear what involvement this person had. The individual who has not been identified is being held in New York under a sealed material witness warrant, which technically means they have first-hand knowledge of the attacks. No further details are known about the suspect.
So who the hell is this material witness they keep reporting about?
Peter, we now have additional information on that material witness arrest warrant, which has been issued. We're being told by sources that the person who has been arrested has links to a relative of Osama bin Laden.
Well, it seems that the Boston address associated to terrorism on the pilot ID to the now material witness suspect arrested at JFK Airport belongs to a relative of none other than Osama bin Laden, who for the past several days, if not instantly after September 11th, has been suspect number one for the attacks, even though it's not until the following day bin Laden publicly denies any involvement in September 11th, for which he later calls the attacks admirable. But let us see what they will reveal about this prize material witness, who undoubtedly had to have been one of the suspects involved in the attempt to hijack United Flight 23 at JFK on Tuesday.
There's no information that this person was involved in the attack, but because of that link to Osama bin Laden's relative and other links, they do feel that this person has highly relevant information, and they also say that they feel that he is a risk of fleeing the country.
Did they tell you where this material witness is at the moment?
Yes, he's being held in New York. The additional information we have is that he's one of the people detained at JFK yesterday, Peter.
Exactly. Thanks, Pierre Thomas. I wanted you to add that so that we could go to John Miller here. John, this is all part and parcel of these two incidents last night, one at Kennedy and one at LaGuardia Airport, which totally spooked the authorities here, which we reported for much of the evening, and then the FBI got kind of anxious about this morning.
Yeah, they dialed back on it this morning and released most of the suspects, but they've held on to this one individual. Today, at a press conference by the Port Authority police, they explained their rationale behind the raid and so on. And when they said they'd released all but one, they were pressed by reporters, why are you holding the one you're holding? And they were very circumspect, only saying, we have sufficient grounds to hold that person. And that apparently relates to what Pierre is talking about.
Do you know anything more about the basis on which they're holding him?
Well, this was what we were told was one of the things that set off big alarm bells, which is, you know, they ran a lot of information through databases, and apparently the address he used up in Massachusetts is an address that was resided at by a Osama bin Laden brother who resides here in the United States. And of course, that raised everybody up, and they're trying to investigate beyond the address. Is there any personal connection?
Do we know that he had a fake ID when he tried to get on that aircraft last night? Or actually when he did get on the aircraft?
Yeah, and it's one of those things that is actually reversed. He had a fake ID that he presented to get on the aircraft, and then under questioning he produced a pilot's license, but the name on the pilot's license was different. And he explained that the false ID he was using was a relative of his, but that the pilot's license was his real name. And it turns out he really is trained and really is a pilot. But the identity he used to get on the flight is not his name.
The Coast Guard, too, is on high alert, stopping incoming boats for inspection, and last night boarding a cruise ship near Miami to detain two suspects. A flurry of arrests at New York airports proved to be a false alarm, but the FBI investigation has made significant progress.
The first known arrest in the attack on America, what law officials call a, quote, material witness, is now in a federal lockup in New York in FBI custody. Two other people in federal custody are said to be cooperating in the investigation. They are said to have significant knowledge about the attacks and are now talking.
A couple of other things. The one person that we heard about arrested tonight on the material witness warrant is one of the men who got into the altercation yesterday and caused the shutdown of the airports in New York, LaGuardia, JFK, and Newark. He is a person who had some disparity in his identification papers. He's been very unwilling to talk to investigators. The FBI thinks he knows more than he's saying. They can't prove that. They don't know that for sure, and that's why he's being held on a material witness warrant.
Reports that there may be more terrorists out there, and word tonight that the first arrest has been made in the terrorist attacks. So we begin in Washington, and our Justice Department correspondent, Kelly Arena, with the details.
Sources also say that there are currently 27 individuals in custody on immigration violations who may or may not know anything about the incidents. Investigators have also put out a so-called watch list informing various authorities, including Border Patrol and the FAA, about 150 individuals the FBI says may have information that could be helpful in the investigation. Now, if those people are found, they will be detained for questioning.
ABC correspondent John Miller has been staying on top of the investigation. So much has happened, John. Just bring us up to date. Where are things now? Just what do we know?
Well, right now in the case, Barbara, they have their first arrest. Now, that's a much better headline than it is a story. A man who federal authorities refuse to identify has been charged as a material witness. He was arraigned today in federal court in White Plains in a sealed proceeding. The papers that detail what he's a witness to or what they hope to glean from him are also sealed in secret. But the judge did order him detained and held, so he is in federal custody tonight.
Well, you know, yesterday when there were the reports of people in New York airports, one wearing a uniform, supposedly, trying to be a pilot, and we heard about all of these different people. All of that's just gone away, those people?
Well, all of those people have been released, but for one. They spent a long night at Kennedy Airport trying to sort out through a series of unlikely stories. Some of the incredible things that set off alarm bells in that case were, one of the passengers tried to board the plane with identification that was false. It was not his. He claimed it was a relative's. That actually checked out. At the same time, he produced a pilot's license, which had a different name on it, which actually that name turned out to be his. So he's posing as somebody he's not, then he's identifying himself as someone he is as a pilot, which also checked out. He had had flight training also in Florida, where the other hijackers had trained. And then add to that, one of the subjects gave an address in Massachusetts, which, are you sitting down?
Yeah.
Was the address of Osama bin Laden's brother, which only made them about twice as much suspicious as they were before. So at that point, they said, everybody stop. They separated them. They interrogated in different rooms. The men taken into custody at LaGuardia were released as a result of a mix-up. Their bags were labeled that they were airline employees when they weren't, but they said these were keepsakes they collected at aeronautic conferences they attended. The Kennedy Airport people were released, except for the one who had that very coincidental address. They're still looking at him.
Well, at least they're trying, aren't they?
But last night they were operating on a very dark assumption that somehow they had two new cells.
Yeah, everybody was this something really seriously has happened.
So much so that they invaded an aircraft with a SWAT team, that they closed air traffic in New York at all three airports, including one that wasn't even involved in the incidents. It took them a long time to get that sorted out. But this morning, as they kind of lined up the coincidence that gave them that thinking, it was with some relief. Even so, they're still operating on the premise that this may not be over, that they have other names, and that there could be other teams out there that they want to find.
So look, we just heard, Peter was talking about the fact that the President, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense are all going to be at Camp David. And this was something that we are authorized to report. Why? I mean, why say exactly where these three men are going to be when there may possibly still be terrorists out there?
I think that they are in a terrible conflict in Washington between the political process and the democracy and the security process, and they're thinking at one time the security people are going to want to maintain a level of safety and secrecy. On the other hand, I think that the people on the political and White House end really want government to appear as normal. They want the president and vice president to appear together. They want the country to have some confidence. And in those conflicts, most often the security people prevail. And every so often the political people say, you're the security people, do what you have to do, but you're going to have to deal with this.